You walk into a room full of people, smiles, laughter, small talk everywhere. But something in you doesn't feel quite right. You wonder why you don't connect like others do, why you often feel out of sync, like a stranger in your own story. You've read about personality types, taken the tests, maybe even tried to fit in. But nothing ever sticks. Nothing ever explains why you feel like you're too much in a world that demands you be less, or too quiet in a world that rewards volume. That's where Carl Jung comes in. He didn't just study behavior, he studied the soul. He believed that beneath your habits, reactions, and emotions lies a deeper structure, a psychological blueprint that governs how you think, feel, relate, and even suffer. And if you've ever felt misunderstood by others, or worse, by yourself, it's probably because no one ever taught you what type of person you are. You see, Jung's idea wasn't just to label people. His mission was to help people understand themselves and then grow from that understanding, because the greatest prison isn't the world outside you. It's the one inside your mind. When you're living someone else's life, wearing someone else's mask, you've been told to be more outgoing, or less emotional, or more logical. You've been shamed for being too sensitive, or too cold, too intuitive, or too detail-oriented. But what if the way you are isn't wrong? What if it's simply the way you were designed? Jung believed that each of us is born with a specific lens through which we view the world. And when you begin to understand that lens, your true psychological type, something unlocks. You stop comparing, you stop apologizing, you start listening to your own mind, your own rhythm. That's what this video is about. By the end of it, you'll understand why you think the way you do, why certain situations exhaust you while others ignite you, and most importantly, how to work with your personality, not against it. This isn't self-help fluff. This is Jungian psychology, and it just might be the most important knowledge you'll ever gain about yourself. So, if you've ever asked, why do I feel disconnected from the world around me? Why do people misunderstand my reactions? Why can't I fit into what society expects? Then stay with this, because the truth is, you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to understand who you are, and then use that understanding to shape the life only you can live. And it all begins with what Jung called the 4 personality types. To understand the 4 personality types, you have to understand the man behind the idea, Carl Gustav Jung. He wasn't your average psychologist. While Freud was dissecting the libido and behaviorists were obsessed with rats in mazes, Jung was wandering into caves, sketching mandalas, and studying ancient myths. He wasn't just trying to fix symptoms. He was trying to understand the architecture of the human soul. Born in 1875 in Switzerland, Jung was quiet, sensitive, and deeply introspective, qualities that would later shape his entire life's work. He spent his career trying to answer a single, massive question: what makes a person whole? Jung didn't believe the goal of life was happiness. He believed it was individuation, the process of becoming your truest, most authentic self. And the only way to do that is to understand your own psyche. While working with patients, Jung noticed something curious. People didn't just differ in their experiences. They differed in how they processed those experiences. Some were energized by people, while others were drained by them. Some relied on facts and details, others on gut instincts. Some made decisions through logic, others through emotion. These weren't random traits, they were patterns, and Jung realized they followed a consistent structure. In the early 1920s, Jung proposed that every person operates through 4 primary psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition, and that these functions express themselves in either an introverted or extroverted direction. That's it. 8 basic psychological types, with endless variations. This theory later became the foundation for tools like the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI. But Jung's work went far beyond personality tests. He wasn't interested in putting people in boxes. He wanted to liberate them from the false self they'd inherited from culture, from trauma, from survival. And his message was radical for the time, and still is today. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Jung believed most people weren't living, they were reacting, acting out old patterns, projecting their wounds, living other people's expectations. But when you uncover your true type, when you recognize how your mind actually works, you start seeing through the illusion. You see why you've always struggled in certain situations and why you thrive in others. You see why certain environments suffocate you, why some people misunderstand you, why you felt like you were too much or not enough. Jung didn't just give us a way to understand personality. He gave us a map of the soul. And the 4 psychological types are the first step on that map. They won't solve your problems, but they'll explain your patterns. And once you understand your pattern, you can begin to change your life. Up next, we'll break down the 4 functions and how they show up in your daily thoughts, emotions, and decisions, often without you realizing. But remember this, Jung never meant for these types to limit you. He believed we all have access to every part of the psyche, but we each start with one dominant lens. Understanding that lens isn't the end of the journey, it's the beginning. Carl Jung believed every human being operates through 4 essential psychological functions, not just skills or traits, but the very lenses through which we perceive reality. These functions shape how we take in information, make decisions, relate to others, and ultimately, how we construct meaning in our lives. Let's break each one down, not as labels, but as truths you'll recognize within yourself or others. 1. Thinking. The mind that measures. Thinking isn't just about being rational. It's about structure. Thinking types navigate the world through logic, clarity, and consistency. They value truth over comfort, systems over sentiment, and seek to understand before they react. These are the people who ask, does this make sense? What's the principle at play here? What are the facts, regardless of how I feel about them? But there's a shadow. Thinking types can become overly detached, disconnected from emotions, theirs and others. They may struggle with empathy, not out of cruelty, but because logic is their compass, even when the terrain requires something softer. In Jung's world, the thinking type doesn't mean coldness. It means orientation, a mind wired to sort, analyze, and construct a rational framework through which the world can be understood. 2. Feeling, the compass of value. Don't mistake feeling for emotion. Jung made it clear, feeling is not just reacting, it's evaluating. Feeling types navigate the world by assessing the value of things, not their usefulness, but their human meaning. They ask, is this right? How does this affect others? What is the emotional truth of this situation? Feeling types prioritize harmony, connection, and authenticity. They are often the caretakers, the moral centers, the ones who instinctively read the emotional temperature of a room. But in their shadow, feeling types can avoid conflict, overextend themselves, or base decisions on emotional attachments rather than long-term clarity. For Jung, feeling wasn't weakness. It was the capacity to weigh the world by its soul, not just its structure. Third sensation. The power of the present sensation types are grounded, alert, and fully tuned in to the now. They focus on facts, experience, details. They trust what they can see, touch, hear. They value stability and tend to be practical, realistic, and action-oriented. They ask, what's actually happening? What are the facts? What needs to be done right now? Sensation types make great doers and implementers. They build the bridges, fix the systems, run the operations. But their shadow is narrowness, a tendency to miss the bigger picture or overlook intuition in favor of what's in front of them. For Jung, the sensation type is the foundation of reality, the one who doesn't just imagine the house, but builds it. 4. Intuition, the seer of possibility. Intuition is the language of patterns, symbols, and futures not yet born. Intuitive types don't focus on what is. They focus on what could be. They see connections where others see chaos. They sense energy shifts, underlying themes, unspoken truths. They ask, what's the deeper meaning here? What's the deeper? Where is this going? What pattern am I sensing? Intuitive types are visionary, imaginative, and often feel like outsiders in practical environments. Their challenge? They can lose touch with reality, spending more time in what might be than in what actually is. Jung believed intuitive types were crucial in pushing the world forward. They're the bridge between the known and the possible, the ones who dream before the rest of us understand why we should. We all use all 4 functions, but one becomes dominant, the one you trust most, the one you return to under stress, the one you probably don't even question. Another becomes your inferior function, buried deep, misunderstood, often underdeveloped. Jung's point was never to label or limit you. His point was this: until you understand how you think, you can't understand why you act. Most people spend their entire lives living from the surface, reacting without knowing the inner machinery driving them. But the moment you identify your dominant function, something incredible happens. You start to see your patterns. You start to see your limitations. And most importantly, you start to see how you can grow. This is how personality becomes transformation. Not a box, but a blueprint. Not a prison, but a mirror, but a... Carl Jung's contribution wasn't just listing functions. It was showing how those functions combine to form what he called psychological types. These aren't casual categories. They are deep, structural insights into the way your psyche is wired to perceive and process reality. Each person, Jung believed, has a dominant attitude, introversion or extroversion, and a dominant function, thinking, feeling, sensation, or intuition. Together, they form your psychological type. But these types aren't about traits. They're about direction, how energy moves within you, how you respond to the world, and how you build meaning in your life. Let's explore how these pieces fit together. Introversion versus extroversion, the direction of energy. Jung was the first to truly define these terms, not as social categories, but as orientations of the psyche. Extroverts direct their energy outward. They are attuned to the external world, people, objects, experiences. They gain strength from interaction, from engagement, from doing. Introverts direct their energy inward. They are attuned to the inner world, thoughts, reflections, imaginations. They recharge through solitude and often feel overwhelmed by too much external stimulation. This isn't about being shy or outgoing. It's about where your psychological roots grow. Extroverts are grounded in the world. Introverts are grounded in the self. Jung saw both as essential, but imbalance in either leads to distortion. The goal is not to become the opposite, but to balance and integrate the neglected parts of the psyche. Dominant functions, your operating system. Each person has one dominant function that colors everything. It's the mode of perception or decision-making that feels most natural, most reliable, most you. So you might be an introverted thinker. You seek inner logical clarity. The world is filtered through abstract reasoning and inner frameworks. You may appear reserved, precise, and focused on intellectual coherence. An extroverted feeler, you orient toward harmony, value, and people. You lead with emotional intelligence, attuned to what others need and how situations feel. An introverted intuitive, you live in symbols, metaphors, and future visions. Your insights come suddenly and deeply, often without explanation. You just know things. An extroverted sensor, you live fully in the moment, alert to physical reality, driven by experience and action. You trust what you see, taste, touch, and hear, and so on. Jung emphasized that the type isn't fixed. It evolves with time. It shifts as we age, as we face crises, as we move from ego to wholeness. But in the beginning, your type becomes your psychological comfort zone, the way you survive, make sense of the world, and build your early identity. Every strength comes with a shadow, and in Jungian psychology, your inferior function, the one opposite your dominant, is the most unconscious, the most underdeveloped, and often the most dangerous. If you lead with thinking, you may repress feeling. If you lead with intuition, you may ignore sensation. And this repression creates imbalance. It can show up as anxiety, projection, addiction, depression. Jung taught that the path to wholeness isn't about becoming someone else. It's about reclaiming what's missing, integrating the function you rejected. Your shadow isn't evil. It's your ignored potential. And the key to finding your true self is not strengthening what you already do well. It's developing what you've neglected. This is where transformation happens. The personality type is not a label. It's a map. It's easy to take a test, get 4 letters, and stop there. But Jung never intended personality to become a box. He saw it as a living system, dynamic, evolving, shaped by experience. The point is not to say, I'm an introvert, so I'll avoid people. The point is to say, I lead with introversion, but I need to develop my ability to engage with the world. The point is not to say, I'm a thinker, so emotions don't matter. It's to say, my default is thinking, but if I ignore my emotions, I won't become whole. Your type tells you where you are, not where you must stay. Jung's true insight was this: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Understanding your type is the beginning of making the unconscious conscious. It's the first step toward reclaiming your story from inherited patterns, parental scripts, and societal molds. Carl Jung never meant for personality types to become a life sentence. They were never meant to define who you are, only to describe where you begin. Because the ultimate goal of Jungian psychology isn't to perfect your type, it's to transcend it, to outgrow the narrow identity shaped by habit, fear, and childhood adaptation, to become more than a personality, to become whole, from ego to self, the journey of individuation. Jung believed that each person is born with a blueprint, not just for how they think and feel, but for who they are meant to become. This path is called individuation, the lifelong process of integrating all parts of your psyche, both conscious and unconscious, into a unified whole. It begins with the ego, the part of you that says, I am this, not that. But individuation asks, what have you rejected? What have you exiled in order to become this? Maybe you buried your sensitivity to appear strong. Maybe you denied your logic to be liked. Maybe you silenced your imagination because it didn't fit into the world's mold. Whatever you left behind, it waits in the shadow, and the shadow waits for your return. You cannot become whole by polishing the parts of yourself you already show the world. You must also walk into the dark and reclaim what was lost. That is the essence of Jung's path, to become not perfect, but real. Most modern self-help is about fixing what's wrong with you. Jung's psychology is different. It doesn't ask, how can I become better? It asks, what part of me have I forgotten? You don't need to be more productive. You need to be more whole. You don't need to be more like them. You need to be more like you. Wholeness means contradiction. It means complexity. It means being both strong and soft, both logical and intuitive, both disciplined and spontaneous. It means becoming a person with depth, not someone optimized for performance, but someone alive with purpose. When you begin to integrate, to listen to the shadow, to understand your unconscious, to explore the functions you ignored, something strange and powerful happens. You begin to feel like yourself, maybe for the first time. Not the self shaped by society, not the self programmed by childhood expectations, but the deeper self, the one who has always been watching, waiting for you to return. Jung called this the self, not the ego, not the image, but the totality of who you are. When you live from this place, everything changes. Your life becomes more than a reaction. It becomes a creation. You're not just a feeler. You're not just a thinker. You're not just a sensor, or an intuitive, or an introvert, or an extrovert. You are all of it, and more. Jung's genius was not in categorizing people. It was in giving them a mirror that doesn't say, this is who you are, but rather, this is where your journey begins. The question is no longer, what's my type? The question is, what's my path? And the only one who can walk it is you.